In it here now, what are you gonna do now? I'm gonna bid on here now. Who bid $500,000 bid?
Welcome to the Legacy of Agriculture. This program will explore the past, present, and future of agriculture. We'll look at the people, products, and events that have formed its history. And now, with today's guest, your host, Chris Bear.
Good morning, folks. This is Josh Erickson with the Legacy of Agriculture. I am not your usual host. I am actually guest hosting today, as your host, Chris Bear, will be on vacation for the next 2 weeks. And today, my guest is Gary Griesse. Gary works with the Granite Threshing Bee. The Granite Threshing Bee is kind of an interesting thing. It's quite a large get-together for tractors and collector tractors, correct?
Yes, it is. In fact, we boast 6,000 people in the 3-day event.
And for those of the listeners who haven't been to Granite, it's not exactly a bustling metropolis before this.
No, it's actually a reclaimed old town. It used
Okay.
to be a railroad depot for shipping cattle, and we've went down to a couple buildings, and we brought her back up to, I think we're right 20-some buildings now that we've moved in, restored, done
Okay.
these things with.
So 20 buildings, and that is not enough to house 6,000 people. So whereabouts are all your guests coming from?
Quite a few states.
Okay.
It's like a big family gathering. And we have families that have gone off and went to other parts of the United States. And sure enough, when Granite comes around, here comes all these families, here comes all these groups. And sure enough, we have Granite.
That is awesome. And how many years have you been doing that now?
Well, we've celebrated 40 years.
40 years.
40
Okay.
years. So it started with a couple guys out in the field and some families, and they started, went out and thrashed a little oats, and they said, this is a good thing. We should do this. And sure enough, 40 years later, we're there.
Okay. Now, so a little bit of my history, Gary. I'm a city kid, right? I grew up in town, and my grandparents are in agriculture. My parents grew up in agriculture, but they worked in town, which means when you say something like a threshing bee or you guys were threshing grain, you got to explain it to me a little bit. Like, you have to understand that that just wasn't the world I was in. So when you say a couple of guys were threshing grain, what's that process? And what does that look like today at the threshing bee?
Well, think of the combines. I mean, they roll through the field and that kind of thing. A threshing machine was a stationary machine for threshing the grains, the heads off of the grains, or the heads off of the grain, and basically feeding it to your horses, feeding it to your livestock, taking it to town and selling it. And today we have demonstrations in corn shelling. We have demonstrations with our sawmill. We have demonstrations with husk harvesting corn.
Okay.
Quite a few different demonstrations. We're not just we're joining the newer generation to appreciating the old history.
Okay, that is actually that's a little bit of what this show is about. So when Chris began this show, it started on the seat of a combine, and his desire was to try and preserve some of the stories of this older generation of farmers that was passing on. And as I've been able to participate in it, it really has been wonderful to hear some of the stories. And I guess before we really kind of dive deep into what Granite's like, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you. So I asked you before this interview, you grew up in Rock Rapids, Iowa, and you're a farm kid.
Yes, I am.
Okay, gotcha. So you know what it's like to drive a tractor. You know what it's like to work with animals. You know what it's like to deal with growing plants.
Yes, I do.
Gotcha.
And I'm a past agriculture teacher also. So
Okay.
we not only got our baptism on the farm, but we actually taught it for 32 years.
That is quite a long time. And so I'm curious, what was it like growing up on the farm just as a kid, And in Rock Rapids, what was it like for your jobs on the farm? What was it like to be a young person at that time?
A lot of hard work.
Yeah.
You got to appreciate the uniqueness of today's agriculture compared to back what we had as far as baling, cleaning out the animals, as far as giving them new bedding, taking the manure out, hauling it. The the strife of growing crops. Uh, we had no chemicals.
Hmm.
Basically 2,4-D was the only basic chemical we had, and today we have clean fields. If we got too many rains right during the uh, growing season, uh, the grass would get higher than than
Yeah.
the crops and that kind of thing. And we had insect problems, and we had army worms, and we had all these different things. But we also had neighbors, and we had uh, get-togethers. We'd get together for corn shelling. We'd get together for threshing. We'd get together. Maybe we'd have even a neighbor would get done early plowing, and it was too early to plant. Here comes a couple tractors over, and they'd help us finish up plowing and stuff like that. And uh, the family, the neighbors, the close proximity of the farms, and especially in Northwest Iowa where I grew up. It was nothing to go drive on the neighbor's yard and talk for 20 minutes and then go about your day, or see how much rain you had, see where you're at. And it was just a fun time.
I think that's really it's interesting because that's not a world that I've really known. A fair amount of agriculture, your smaller family farms still exist, but my uncle's operation has, compared to my grandpa's operation, has since grown larger. And that seems to be the way of the world, that farms get bigger as technology gets bigger. You need larger chunks of land to justify the purchase of larger equipment. But that is interesting, being so close to neighbors. About how large were each of your farms in that part of the world?
Quarter,
Hmm.
160 acres, 320. Some people had a quarter and an 80, and it seemed in the fall everybody got a good crop, and everybody went to town, and we got Christmas presents.
Yep.
And bad years, sometimes the Christmas presents were a little lean, but it was still family. It was still the turkey or the goose, and it was a celebrating good time.
Yeah, and it is. I think nowadays we've got a lot, but almost too much. In the sense that you miss out on some of that community nowadays, and it's nice to see even today when neighbors will drive over and help other neighbors. That still kind of warms my heart, and that's kind of why I enjoy auction day, just watching the crowd as people talk and get together, and other different ag get-togethers as people, the folks who haven't seen each other in a while, getting a chance to sit down and just chew the fat. So, um, when you were young, so you would have been an adult by the time the farm crisis hit then.
Hmm.
Gotcha. About how, is it okay to ask? Maybe it's wrong to ask age for a gentleman in an interview, but
I'm 72. Going to
72.
be 73 here coming
Okay.
up. So, but farm crisis was in the 80s,
Hmm.
and
You would have
I
been
was
teaching by
I
then?
was probably teaching about then
Okay.
and that kind of thing. But farm crisis was rough.
Hmm.
A lot of neighbors and stuff who had overextended themselves didn't seem to make it.
Well, I'd love to talk a little bit in our next section as we transition to chat about your years teaching, how you kind of educated people through that tough time, and then what that looked like in your life. So, before we go to a commercial break, we want to thank our sponsors, Pfeiffer's Auction and Realty. They've got a June auction coming up, and then a August pre-harvest sale. And we also want to thank our other sponsor, Richards Repair, out of Larchwood, Iowa. They do a wonderful job with diesel engines and with loaders, and we just cannot say enough good about Richards Repair. So, folks, we'll be right back with the second section of The Legacy of Agriculture. Hang tight.
Hi, this is Jasmine at Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Pfeiffer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pfeiffers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pfeiffer's. Nobody does it better.
Good morning, folks. This is your host of the Legacy of Agriculture, Josh Erickson. I am guest hosting today as Chris Bear, your normal host, is on vacation for the next couple weeks. And I am here with Gary Griesse, former ag teacher and Rock Rapids farm boy. So you grew up in Northwest Iowa.
Yes, I did.
Good farm ground down there and a lot of great folks down there in Iowa. So I wanted to chat with you, Gary. See, you mentioned that you'd gone into ag teaching.
Right.
So you grew up on the farm in kind of a close-knit community where folks were really working together to help get the crop out of the field, working together to get the crop into the field. And then you turned 18. So what kind of called you off the farm at that point?
Well, there were several things. We were right in the middle of the Vietnam conflict. And they drew my number. And I knew that it was either going to be going overseas or going to college and going into Air Force ROTC and hopefully get this thing taken care of and that kind of thing. Well, a year after college, or excuse me, year after my freshman year, it ended.
Okay.
And the numbers ended. And it was my goal, of course, to go into ag education. My mother was a teacher, and she encouraged me to become a teacher.
Oh,
And
so
of
you
course,
you grew up in a family of education then.
right. And
Okay.
the agriculture profession and stuff like that, teaching what I believed in and that kind of thing, was just a natural step. I went to SDSU and graduated there and went to Eastern Iowa and my first job was over in Cresco, Iowa.
Okay.
So we had basically some actual good stories to tell kids.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So
I got to ask though, at that time period, so this is the 1970s,
Right.
correct? At that time period that you're going into teaching, what was the ag program like in college, right? I know, so Dordt College recently added an ag program, and that was a few years back, and I remember that was big news because several of my friends had went there. What was the curriculum like? Was it, very intensive? What did it focus on? What did they teach you?
I'm glad you asked that question because it's not the same today as what we went into. And a lot of my teaching background was teaching the basic skills.
The basic skills of agriculture?
The basic skills of agriculture.
Okay.
I know I took a poultry course. And I
Really?
still raise poultry. And we got to go from beginning to the end butchering.
Okay.
We took meats courses and we'd do the hands-on things. I taught that.
Okay.
Ag mechanics, welding, all those basic skills that we did on the farm, we were intensely worked with those. I know we've had hours in the ag engineering shop and looking at dynamometer of different tractors being tested. I know we'd learn how to make rafters
Okay.
for putting up buildings. I know that horticulture classes and things like that, it was always hands-on. And when I progressed in teaching and that kind of thing, there was an emphasis. Some of the ag teachers might not like me saying this, but there was an emphasis amongst us older ag teachers to teach those skills. And then when we got to contest, our students were prepared from the actual classroom, not just reading books and digesting information, but the hand-on skills, the mixing the cement and the judging the cattle and livestock and that kind of thing. We didn't teach for contest. We taught for the careers that would be on the farm, the careers that would be in agriculture, and to prepare the students so that they actually had the hands-on. And all through my career, that's basically what I taught.
Okay.
Today, I know some of the emphasis on the actual skills has been taken away, and students who don't get some of those skills, especially in like the welding.
Mhm.
I taught repair welding. Some of the welding professors, welding programs around here thought, well, I should just teach industrial wiring, wire welding, and those kind of things. Well, I taught the repair. How are you going to repair cast iron? How are you going to repair your uh, different parts on your machinery and weld them with different types of steel and those kind of things? I know that I've received praise from some because my students were well prepared, and they had uh, more of an ability for reading diagrams.
Mm-hmm.
They had more of an ability for safety, and uh, comparing to some of the students they had in their classes with them, where that were maybe from the city or maybe from different ag programs, my students were always further ahead just because they had the hands-on. And that's something I strongly believe through all my career.
One thing that's interesting to me personally is the difference in how people learn. And what I mean by that, I have three older brothers, and I always loved the book learning, but for whatever reason, the hands-on learning, I was always behind the other kids, and that's fine. My brother Brock was the complete opposite. He hated sitting in front of books, but the moment he started learning welding, he excelled. And so I think that these hands-on courses are starting to be phased out of schools, and that is something that's sad to see, that home ec is maybe not taught as much, or wood shop is maybe not taught as much as it used to be. And I think that especially for folks who are running a farming operation, you need to wear so many different hats. I mean, you can't just be a farmer. You have to be a farmer and a mechanic and a businessman and a marketer and nowadays an agronomist, and you have to know animal husbandry. I mean, the the sheer amount of information is mind-boggling. And even sitting with my grandpa one time, he said, it used to be that they said, "Oh, I was just a dumb farmer." But at the end of the day, you look at the stuff that he did, he had to know more than so many other folks in different industries where you could specialize, because on the farm, you're so far from those specializations. You need to figure out how to get the tractor out in the field. You don't have time to wait for a mechanic. You need to make sure that it's out plowing, And so I think that that's very interesting to me, how different people rise to that task and how different our values maybe have gotten nowadays.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's a little bit of a rant, I know, but um,
It's a good rant.
okay, well that's nice. I think that we here at the show definitely believe in education, and so how did your experience in education? How did your experience as an educator? Can you speak to some of the positives you saw out of that? You mentioned you were commended for your students being more prepared. Is there anything specific that comes to mind from that time period in your life?
Well, I had a call the other day, and I had a student, and he was not performing well in the other classes. You sit all day
Mm-hmm.
in English, math, and I'm not saying everything's wrong there, but you sit all day,
Mm-hmm.
you're ready to scream at the end of the day if you're a good type of person that likes to get up and going. And I had students who would come down to my class and they're ready to learn
Yeah.
because they got to go out in the shop, they got to do the hands-on. Maybe we're given shots in animal care or something like that, but they got to do something. But I had a student talk to me one day, and he says, "I went to the School of Mines and became an engineer." And he says, "I don't think I'd have made it past my freshman year if it wouldn't have been for you and the way you taught."
That is pretty amazing.
And I had another student one day, he's very successful in business outside here, and he has uh, one day just calls me out of the blue. I had retired about 5 years, calls me out of the blue, and he says, "I remember hooking up that electrical circuit." And he says, "I just wanted to tell you, I paid off. It might be 20 years later, but," he says, "it really paid off. I remembered how we did it in class."
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you've got that much memory of those classes, those hands-on classes, and still are doing your job today, I think that probably is success.
I think that's a fair assessment. I really do. Well, we'll go to a quick commercial break, and then we will be right back for section number 3, where I think we'll talk a little bit more of education, and then let's kind of get down into the nitty-gritty of the Granite Threshing Bee and what specifically got you involved with that.
Hi, this is Jasmine at Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Pfeiffer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pfeiffer's.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pfeiffer's. Nobody does it better.
Good Saturday morning, folks. I am here with Gary Griesse, Ag Educator and Rock Rapids Farm Boy.
Yes.
And so, Gary, we've had a wonderful first couple segments. We've been chatting a lot about your childhood, your transition into ag education, and I'm kind of been excited. So the reason I gave you a phone call is you help organize the Granite Threshing Bee, which is a very unique event because we talked in our first segment about how Granite is a very small town and that it kind of, for a brief moment in time every year, it booms. It grows very large. And let's chat a little bit about, first off, I'd like to talk about how you got involved in the Granite Threshing Bee, and then I'd like to talk about how you've seen it change into what it is today. So how'd you get started with that?
My love of tractors and machinery, I suppose.
Okay.
My love of antiques, and just getting around, probably more important than anything. You bring something down and you show it off, and then there's all these other collectors that have the same similar interest.
One thing that's fun about collectors and that I've noticed is they like to talk about what they collect, and there's usually a lot of information there. And I always love just being able to sit back and listen. So,
And I'm a lifelong learner. If I can learn something new and take it home with me, if I can talk to 10 different people that
Yep.
I've never met before, I'm not a cliquey person. I'm
Yeah.
Get out there and let's talk. And it's my day complete.
Yeah, that's not so bad, is it? So,
No.
so tell me about your first time at the Granite Threshing Bee.
Actually, I'm going to take you back a little further. When I was 14 years old,
Okay.
my grandfather gave me our family tractor. It's a
Really?
1938 John Deere Bee.
Okay.
He bought it brand new, couldn't afford it, but
Whereabouts did he pick that up?
it actually came from new from the the old implement shop that was on the river,
Okay.
McBride Implement, and he bought it new on rubber. And of course, it's been in our family. We've had 6 generations have run it, including my great grandfather,
Really?
who got to run it out there, and then Grandpa run it, and Dad run it, and I ran it. And the tractor has set out. I mean, it was a very prized possession, but they had a horse sleeping sickness. And the reason they bought it was because of the fact that they went out to the barn one morning and there was 3 horses dead.
Really?
So it spread through the community and that kind of thing. And it wasn't really that farmers were that innovative that had to take on the tractor. It was because of the fact that they had to have something to farm their ground with. And so Grandpa bought the new tractor.
Could you imagine trying to deal with that? I mean, waking up one morning and your team of horses is passed on and realizing that farmers can get very attached to their animals, and so can everybody, right? But, and to have to realize that you have to deal with that on top of the fact that you still have to get work done. I mean, that would be just terrifying. So,
Yeah. That tractor has set out 6 nights in its lifetime.
really?
It has the original tires on it. It still does not use a drop of oil, has never been touched. I mean, and it's been used. It's just that Grandpa worshiped that tractor, changed the oil regularly, did everything they possibly could, because of the fact that it was such a major investment and he was going to keep it good.
Well, and yeah, you spend that kind of money back then or today, you have to keep it nice. There's not another option. Yeah.
$860 with a new cultivator on it.
Really? That
I've
is
got the original
fascinating.
bill of sale for it.
I tell you what, you and I, after we're done with this interview, we'll walk down to a John Deere dealership with $860. We'll see what we walk out with. How about that?
A handful of filters and
Yeah, I think that's about right. Maybe a jug of oil. Yeah.
a jug of oil.
That is something else. So you guys are still running that tractor.
Yes, I have it. Probably be displaying it down to Granite this year. I belong to the 2-cylinder club, and we're featuring the Model B. So we're going to be. That's one I plan on taking down, and it has the cultivator on it, and it is complete and it is very accurate.
So I don't just get to hear about this tractor. If I come down and see you at the Threshing Bee, I can see this tractor.
You can hear it run.
That is amazing.
So
that is just amazing. So you have been in the collector world then for a while, keeping things nice, preserving history. What then moved you to try and pass that on to other folks? Was it just that part of you that loves education, or why did you get involved with this organization specifically?
Well, I was already teaching the kids how to restore things in class.
Okay.
And over the years, we had quite a few restorations and people there. And again, it's the camaraderie of being able to get along with other collectors, talk about things, help them out.
Yep.
I've spent a lot of time with smelly carburetor hands because of the fact that I helped somebody take their carburetor out and got a gas drench on it,
Yep.
And then the sweet smell, or excuse me, not only the sweet smell, but the sweet sound of getting it running again, and just encouragement of people.
That is something I will tell you. If you want to work in this kind of industry, you got to have a strong nose. You got to deal with it, because I remember I left work one day and I must have stank like diesel for a week. It was just terrible, because that's how it goes, right?
That's the way it goes.
So yeah, you got to just live with that. But no, so you've been doing it for a while, even before your involvement with Granite. You were helping students learn to restore, that kind of thing.
Right. But Granite is there, and like I say, Granite is the camaraderie part of it.
Okay.
We're more than just an organization. All through the winter, we have our Saturday coffees that once a month, and then we have our mowing crew over there. We'll have 17 to 20 mowers, I've counted, mowing the acres of Granite. And boy, if you want some competition, don't blow your grass up against the building wrong.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Make sure your decks are the same height.
Absolutely perfect. They're
Perfect
particular.
and stuff. And you'll find Granite is a very well manicured place. If it needs repair, it gets fixed by the mowing crew. If there's Christmas lights to put up and that kind of thing, and there's other organizations come in and volunteer time and help too. But we have a terrific group down there. And again, it's just a super way of getting together for a cup of coffee and then going out and doing the job.
Well, we're coming down to the end of our third segment, so we got to take a moment to thank our sponsors. And then in our following segment, I'm really excited. You've got some announcements about the Granite Threshing Bee this year specifically, so we'll get into that. But before we do, we're going to go to a brief commercial break, and we want to thank our sponsors, Pfeiffer's Auction and Realty. They've got a wonderful catalog of land sales and equipment auctions coming up. And then we also want to thank our sponsor, Richards Repair, out of Larchwood, Iowa. We appreciate both Pfeiffer's and Richards Repair for sponsoring this show. They make these conversations possible, and they make sure I get to learn something. So that's quite a lot of fun. So we'll be back with our fourth segment.
Hey, this is Jasmine at Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Pfeiffer's offers multiple ways to bid and buy at our equipment and land auctions. You can bid online, in person, or place pre-bids before the sale even starts. By providing convenient bidding platforms, we make sure that you can buy the items or parcels you want the way you want to. Visit Pfeiffers.com to see a complete list of our auctions. When it comes to bidding, go with Pfeiffer's. Nobody does it better.
Good Saturday morning, folks. This is your host of the Legacy of Agriculture, Josh Erickson. I am subbing for Chris Baer this week and next week, and I'm sitting here with Gary Griesse who is an ag educator and a helping hand at the Granite Threshing Bee. And Gary, we've had a wonderful first 3 segments. We're kind of coming down close to the end, but I wanted to chat with you a little bit today about what's coming up for Granite this year, because from the sounds of it, you've got some exciting things in the tank.
We sure do. We sure do. It's another fantastic program we're going to be putting on. A lot of volunteers and that kind of thing. Good food. And it's a free show.
Okay.
If you have not been to Granite before, it's the largest free show in the United States.
Really?
At least in Iowa.
At least in Iowa, okay,
yeah. We'd like to say it. But we did get more nationwide fame just a few years ago when COVID struck. We were one of 6 shows in the United States that actually had their show. We had people in from Chicago and from Duluth, Saskatchewan. We had
Really?
one guy come from Saskatchewan with his tractor to pull in our contest because there were no shows.
That is amazing.
And we never heard any repercussions from having it. And it was just a great show. So,
especially at a time when I think people maybe needed something to take their minds off of what was going on.
It was a big relief to most people.
What a blessing.
So,
yeah. So so this year you've got some special stuff coming up.
Special stuff. I'll have to show this.
For those of you who are listening on the radio, we're going to show a poster. You can see that on YouTube, or you can hear about it again on Apple or Spotify. But yeah, let's chat about what you got for tractors there.
We have 2 featured tractors, and a couple of years ago we did we had one of the larger gatherings of the Minneapolis UDLX.
Okay.
And I think we had the largest gathering ever of them.
Okay.
And so we put out the word that we're looking for certain tractors. The one was built down in Iowa. It's called the Theman. So we have a poster out that says, wanted dead or alive, running or not running. So if there's any Themans out there, give us a call. You can go through our website and collect, you contact us on it. And there's also the co-op number 1 and co-op number 2. We're looking for these tractors.
Can you go over what your website is for our listeners? How do they find the Granite Threshing Bee? If they're interested in, which 2 tractors were they?
This is the Theman, which was a put-together tractor. They used a Model T and I think Chrysler engines in them.
Okay.
And then we have the co-op, which was actually built in Battle Creek, Michigan.
Okay.
Now we have 1 of each of these, but we'd like as many to come as we possibly could to make our show.
Awesome. So let's say, for the sake of argument, I'm collecting. Where do I get in contact with you, Gary?
Okay, you can call the Granite Threshing Association Incorporated, and we're at Granite, Iowa. And so it's, and then we also do have Facebook, Granite Threshing.
Okay.
Threshing Bee.
And so we got Facebook, they can contact you. You've got a website at thegranitethreshingbee.com, I believe.
Yes.
And so that's how folks can get a hold of you. So these tractors, you're going to be displaying them. And I believe we talked about they're going to be running down there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. So people will be able to see these tractors actually start up and hear what they sounded like coming out of the factory.
Yeah.
That is just fascinating to me.
So.
And what other special activities do they have? We were talking, so I've got some little people in my life, some young family members. What kind of history do you have that you're able to teach folks?
Oh, we have a lot of demonstrations. Excuse me. We have a lot of demonstrations and that kind of thing, but we have a sawmill we're very proud of.
Okay.
And we're sawing lumber just like they did in the old days, running it with the old tractors. We've got corn shelling. And we'll put on several different corn shellers and tractors on those and switch around and that kind of thing. The corn husking, the actual threshing and that kind of thing. If you've ever seen a child's eyes open up and you see standing by the corn sheller and watching Grandpa tell how it is, putting the ears of corn in and watching the cobs come out one end and the corn going up in the wagon, and the little child just opens up their eyes and they're looking, because this is Yeah, it's noisy and dusty, but more importantly, it's something that Grandpa can tell him about. And I've seen that many times and stuff, and it's just a fun time out there. We got kitty tractor pull for the little kids. We have inflatables. We have a corn sandbox.
And you have some big kid tractor pulls down there too, don't you?
Right. We have the well, on Saturday night we have the exhibitors pull, and that's on the step-on sled. But on Friday night, of course, is the big pull, and we go up to 1960 with that pull.
Okay.
So just look on our website, and it'll show the posters and stuff of that. So yeah, and then of course we also have the garden tractor pull and stuff like that. For the ladies, we have my wife is very involved with the quilt show. Saturday morning, she has a program for the ladies on signature quilts, and we have like the trained people will have the trains take the children through those, the older children also,
Mm-hmm.
and we have quite a group that maintains them in our depot. And yes, we got to mention it's a free show.
That is amazing. And
And
when is this that folks can come down and see you?
it's always the third week of July.
The third week of July. So this year that'll be the 18th, 19th, and 20th.
Right.
Awesome. Because we want our listeners to be able to come see. And you know, Gary, I would love to sit and pick your brain. I've been just absolutely having the time of my life with this conversation, really. But unfortunately, we have about 2 minutes left in our show, and I still got one big question to ask you. We here at the Legacy of Agriculture, we really love agriculture and we support young people in agriculture. So if you had to distill one piece of advice for a young person looking to get into agriculture or who is currently working in the agricultural field or restoring tractors, what would your advice to them be?
I would say my generation, the generation past me that is involved in this, find yourself a good mentor. And we will gladly give advice to it, how to get parts. I have several on my dial that are calling me regularly about tractor parts, where to get tires, how to do this, how to set governors, how to set the magnetos, where to take your carburetor to get it done. We have a wealth of information, and we just love to share it. So if, yes, it can be expensive to do a tractor, but it can be very economical too. Depends on what you're looking for. And I know members that even have gone to sales with younger lads and younger gals, and sure enough, have helped them buy a tractor, or kind of growled at the other guy who was bidding against them because of the fact that they wanted a young person
Yep.
to get into it. So yeah, we know tractors out there that that are for sale. We know tractors out there that would be a good project for them. In fact, if I know collectors that if you have an FFA or a 4-H organization close by, usually there's some incentives through those organizations. They will sponsor a tractor, and they will basically take it to the shop and let these young youth work on it and restore it and compete in contests. And a lot of our members would do that.
That is amazing. And folks, you know, I've loved this conversation. Gary, I have to get you in front of Chris. I think you guys are two peas in a pod. I think you're going to have a lot to chat about. So honestly, I really do hope to have you back on the show sometime in the near future. For those of you who are listening, we got to thank our sponsor, Pfeiffer's Auction and Realty and Richards Repair. And you can find the Legacy of Agriculture on Apple, Spotify, and now YouTube. We'll be back next week with another show. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Here now, what are you gonna do now? I'm gonna been on here now. Who bid $500,000 bid?
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of The Legacy of Agriculture with Chris Bear, sponsored by Pfeiffer's Auction, Realty, and Land Management. Call Pfeiffer's at 605-836-2277.